Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. It's been over 2 weeks since Russia started their spring-summer offensive campaign, which was supposed to be massive, and well, so far it's been a massive dud. Russia has not achieved nearly any kind of the goals that they would want to, and for the fun today, I will tell you from time to time how the Russian propagandists are showing this map, because I spent a bit of time looking at the maps that the pro-Russian bloggers are sharing, and well, let's just say the only thing that is real on those maps is the departure from reality. But let's look at the front line itself. We start from the north around Vovchansk. As you remember, at some point ago, there was some Russian activity here, kind of south of Vovchansk, and at the time I said that it would be just push-pull, that it would be Ukrainians, Russians changing hands, and it is still indeed the case. It's just that in the last week we got additional new videos showing that Russians are trying to attack, but then we showed that Ukrainians were trying to push towards Vovchansk. So the long story short, situation around the north of Vovchansk right now is more or less stable. A notable thing that has been shown beforehand is that Russia has intensified fires alongside the border of Ukraine. We don't know if it's going to mean anything, but there's definitely some activity across the border from the Russians. So far with firings, some diversion groups, but generally speaking, nothing concrete so far. Kupyansk, we saw a big report this week from the Yuri Butusev, who is the commander of the, not the FPV, but the drone battalion inside of Khartia Corps, who is working on this direction. And he was surprisingly very optimistic. If you don't know the guy, he's extremely critical of everything that is happening in Ukraine. He always looks for how do you spy the current administration, and how do always because he intends well, but he's always looking at that negative to always point out. And when I was watching his overview of the situation, I was actually shocked in just how much positive he had to say about the improvements within the Ukrainian military. And he stated that after the successful Ukrainian operations, right now there is just one position of Russians left in the whole city, and it's just going to get cleared out shortly. So Kupyansk is indeed finally done and over with. Some movement is around Lyman. Now, this is where the first thing that the Russians are reporting. So the situation in Lyman is like this. Russians are relatively close, and they sometimes have some infiltration groups that are making it their way into the city of Lyman, where they get promptly eradicated. Again, I cannot show you the videos. They're pretty brutal, but if you're in our Discord, you will see that Russians are getting destroyed pretty often, and they just cannot establish their position in the city whatsoever. Now, if you would check the Russian Z propagandists, then Russian Z propagandists are already showing that they're controlling all of this area, and that they're controlling already half of the Lyman, actually, this is supposed to be as well. So Russians on their maps are already halfway done with Lyman, and it's about to get captured. Reality is they are not even close to establish themselves on the territory of Lyman, and this has been the situation for the last 5 months or so. Around the Siversk pocket, I talked a lot, and right now the pocket is continuing to be closed slowly, where Ukrainians are withdrawing and Russians are slowly closing the pocket. What we are monitoring here is there is this river, and Russians basically need to find a way how to cross this river, and I've talked about this pretty much in every video. So far, Russians have not advanced there. Chasiv Yar. Oh my God. The next city after Bakhmut. Remember Bakhmut? That was a big one, right? So now we're talking about Chasiv Yar. It's the next city in Bakhmut. Now, Ukrainians always show that they are pretty active in Chasiv Yar. Specifically, there were certain reports 2 weeks ago where Ukrainians have been counterattacking the southern part of this area where Russians are supposedly in control. Ukrainians also showed that they were present in this district over here. And so the Russian propagandists to try to kind of mitigate this, that no, we actually are in control of Chasiv Yar. I mean, yes, there are some Ukrainian videos, but this is like completely done for. So what Russians are drawing on their maps is not only that they're fully in control already of this northern part, they also are showing that they're fully in control of this southern part. And basically they're putting like essentially Ukrainians in this like small pocket where they showed some videos from Ukraine and kind of like, yes, we are like totally encircling them and so on, which is, again, very far from the truth. We know that because Deep State and the map of Deep State that we're using here, they have proven time and time again, when they are preparing their map, they're using the philosophy of there should be less lies about the situation at the front line. So they are very meticulous in the way that they're verifying the information, and they are pretty accurate to their realistic situation. As a person that went to the east, I can definitely tell you that it is pretty accurate. I saw some of the maps that Ukrainians are actually using at the time, and to be honest, I mean, there has been some difference in different areas, but generally speaking, not that far from the truth. Kostyantynivka, this is the key point that we're interested in for this spring-summer campaign. The goal of Russia in 2025 is to approach the agglomeration of Kramatorsk-Slovyansk. If Russia even wants to try to achieve any kind of goals in 2025, they must approach this. Otherwise, there is no chance that they can try to next year maybe take this part and then maybe declare some kind of victory, which is not a victory, but nonetheless. The point of the matter is they're still not even close at taking Lyman. They're still not over the river that is crucial around the Siversk direction, and they still haven't even touched Kostyantynivka and later Drushkivka to approach the Kramatorsk-Slovyansk agglomeration from the south. So far, the Russian tempo is not encouraging to the idea that they can reach this big Ukrainian stronghold. So all of the plans of Russians that they potentially can show some kind of big progress in 2026 so far doesn't really look like it much. In Kostyantynivka last week, we saw very interesting videos where Ukrainians shown that Kostyantynivka was attacked from actually 4 sides. It was pretty intense fighting, but Ukrainians were able to hold through. Now, there is a lot of fighting right now inside of city of Kostyantynivka. Some of the forward groups from Russians are already reaching the middle of the city, but generally speaking, they are still being mostly held in the southern part of the city. And these attacks on Kostyantynivka have been prevented. And actually, more interesting, this northern attack, this was not only stopped by Ukrainians, but they were actually able to counterattack and regain some of the ground in this area, which now complicates some of the Russian approaches on their main direction from the south, because now they're getting a little bit flanked. This is obviously all good news, and Ukrainian armed forces are not making it easy for the Russians. Moving along the front line towards Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, this is probably the only area where Russians are still slowly crawling forward. And again, Rodinske, which Russians claim that they've captured I think 5 times already, this is also another back and forth between Russians and Ukrainians. The only kind of developments that happened recently is north of Hrishine, which was a Ukrainian stronghold here. Russians were able to kind of flank it from the north, and right now there is some fighting around this Nova Alexandrivka. And again, here on the Russian Z propagandists maps, this whole thing is already taken, and actually Russians are already approaching Shevchenkove. So again, Russians are reporting to their own followers that yes, we are completely crushing Ukrainians, and it is always hilarious because of what's happening next. Specifically, the situation around this front line. This is where Ukrainians are counterattacking. And as you can see here, Deep State, despite being pro-Ukrainians, are actually very conservative in showing how much Ukrainians are actually able to liberate. For example, there is this settlement of Berezove. This settlement of Berezove has supposedly been still in control by the Russians, or at least in gray area. However, Russians just released this video where they showed, oh, look, we are crushing Ukrainians, and in this video they are striking with FPV drones some of Ukrainian soldiers. The problem is the context of this video. Because on this video, we saw Ukrainian soldiers essentially setting up positions and slowly kind of walking around this area, sort of like this is not the front line at all. Like this is already sort of like a back line, maybe not the farthest back line, but this is not like the front line. And the fact that the Russian drone made it this way was sort of like more surprising for some Ukrainians. And more importantly, this was actually not timestamped, but located when this was filmed. And it was actually filmed around the 15th of March, so 1503. So if Ukrainians were already present in Berezove 15 days ago, which is over 2 weeks, and it was supposedly backline, then are Ukrainians really just there on the border, or they're actually much further? And the truth of the matter is that we got last week additional video footage of Russians bombing Ukrainian positions already in this area. So this map, again, is very conservative. Someone that I think also is conservative, but is a lot more representative, kind of in a nutshell, is this map from AMK Mapping. I don't fully support a lot of his mapping practices, but this is actually very nicely seen how Ukraine liberated those 300 kilometers that were claimed. And this is now truly in control of Ukraine. Because here, for example, you see the same settlements of Berezove that now we just confirmed is already in Ukrainian control. So yes, Russians have counterattacked, they have started pushing back to Ukrainians, but Ukrainians are, unfortunately for Russians, still advancing forward. So Ukrainians are doing really well. Obviously, Russians still have this whole area in red, by the way. And finally, there was some fighting around the Orikhiv direction here in the south, as well as Ukrainians attacking some of the Russians' positions in Hulyai-Polye, which Russians now are in control of. Overall, the situation is not favorable for Russians. Again, Russia has been pretty much riding the coattails that they have been attacking non-stop. Now the situation, as I just explained to you, is not that decisive. This is big contrast to the last year. Last year, you all remember, like every time we talk, the only thing I mention is basically Russians attack. And then take. Now, it's not the same. And we're seeing a lot of the Russian attacks. We see a lot of videos, again, you can check out Discord for the videos, where Russian columns are just getting burned, Russians just getting destroyed. And yeah, they can move here and there, but it's not going nearly at any kind of tempo that Russians would wish it would. So talking about destruction, some nice juicy videos dropped from Ukraine. One is some of the Russian long-range missile artillery systems have been struck. These are Tornado systems, now pretty rare by this point, and they are able to strike targets over 120 kilometers away. They have even smart GPS-guided missiles, so you can think about like a HIMARS, sort of a Russian alternative. Beyond that, in Crimea, the whole group of the Bastion launchers have been destroyed. These things are pretty expensive and pretty, rare find. These are launching missiles. I believe they're called Zircon missiles to Ukraine. And the fact that Ukrainians found them and destroyed them, again, very rare find, but very welcome one. And Russians also show that they have been destroying certain things. For example, they showed a video in which they've destroyed the Ukrainian Patriot systems. It is on the video and it is shown, so most likely it is. Well, how to put it lightly? Have you followed this war at all? Because anyone that followed this war, they saw this video and then they would start laughing their butts off. Why? Because this is an open field where there is like accurate small trenches dug out right in the open space, and Patriot systems deployed just over there. Please have at it. So everyone with half a brain instantly recognizes that this is obviously a decoy. Most likely it is a reinforced decoy. They put some barrels with gasoline or something so the explosion looks a little bit better. But clearly anyone that follows the war in Ukraine understands that no, in the modern war, no one is putting their systems like this in the open. This is very much non-starter. But let's look at something that will definitely have an impact on the war in Ukraine, which is the situation around the Middle East. Specifically, President Zelensky toured around the Middle East states and signed security agreements between the Saudi Arabia and Ukraine, Qatar and Ukraine, and United Arab Emirates and Ukraine. Guys, President Zelensky is doing a fantastic job. This situation is very unfortunate. Obviously, the big oil prices are an issue, but we're going to get to it. But the fact of the matter that Ukraine is now becoming a security provider for essentially infinite petrodollar states, this is going to be big. I was hoping we're going to see something big, and the fact that they're stating that it's going to be 10-year agreements signed between Ukraine and these states, that means that Ukraine is going to get a big influx of funds very soon and for quite a long time. So all of the predictions that Ukrainian defense industry are going to get super boosted are now becoming true. But the point that I'm saying about the oil prices is because of the Ukrainian kinetic sanctions. My last video, I talked extensively a lot, but I think this video that was filmed from a plane, this is the Russian port of Ust-Luga. This is how it looks like from the ground up. Guys, it's on fire. And recently, last night, I believe, Ukrainians struck it again, the third time. Russia has its exports stopped. And not only is it an issue because of oil, it is an issue of production. The truth of the matter is, a lot of the Russian facilities that are now working with oil, they're stating that they are out of capacity for storage. They cannot process so much oil. The biggest issue being heavy oil, because Russia is not really using heavy oil a lot for a lot of their shipping, because they're not doing a lot of shipping. But they are selling a lot of that heavy oil out to the states in the world. Yet because they cannot ship it out, a lot of that heavy oil is now being accumulated at Russian storage facilities, and Russian refining facilities are now stating that no, we cannot accept more orders for oil processing because we just don't have where to store the produced stuff, which is a big issue for the Russian oil producers, because if they will be forced to close down some of their oil pumps, then they would not really have any options to reopen them, because a lot of them are in the permafrost area. And if they're closed, these facilities, then they would need to try to find some kind of Western technology back into Russia to try to reopen them. It's not an easy task to do at all. Guys, Ukraine is doing an amazing job to fighting Russia, and it's doing it because you support it. So let's continue doing the best that we can and support Ukraine. Participate in our fundraiser for the Black Raven Battalion with FPVs. We are doing fantastically. Thank you so much for everyone that is supporting. I love you. Trust in Ukraine, support Ukrainian armed forces. Slava Ukraini, and I will see you next time.